Back live with you tonight here on In Focus. Now, there's been mixed reaction to some of the contestants participating in this year's Miss South Africa. Some social media users are objecting to the inclusion of a particular contestant born in the country but of parents who are from other countries. Now, in 1995, of course, there were laws that were put in this country that speak to the principle of citizenship by birth. What are your thoughts on that particular debate? Do you think these are principles or provisions that certainly should be upheld? Weigh in tonight on 072-110-5584. 072-110-5584. Otherwise, drop us an X at Newzroom 405. What are your views on the provisions of that section, Section 2, which would have been amended, of course, to allow for citizenship by birth in particular instances when particular provisions are met? But the Deputy Minister at Home Affairs here to tell us a little bit more about that. Njabulo Nzuza, good evening, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time.
Good evening, Thabo, and good evening to all the viewers at home, and thank you for having us.
I suppose I could say the confusion is coming about in this particular debate because of the substitutions which were made in this instance to Section 2 of Act 8 of 1995. Take us back to what led to this particular amendment and what was before and what is there now.
Well, firstly, I just want to indicate, Thabo, that our role is basically to deal with the issue of citizenship and how does a person become a citizen of the country. We do not venture into divulging personal information of individuals under any circumstances, but we thought it's important for us to provide clarity. The act that we are referring to is Act number 88 of 1995, which is the Citizenship Act. Now, firstly, let me just take you through the principle that there are two ways in the world that a person becomes a citizen. It is what is called from the word sanguinis, which is Italy, and sanguinis comes from the principle of that you become a citizen by birth if you are born of one of your parents must be of that particular country. The other one being jus soli, which is the principle of land, that you are born within the borders of that particular country. Here in South Africa, we then use what the principle of jus sanguinis, which has to do with the right to citizenship by blood. And by blood, I mean that either one of your parents or both of your parents are actually South African. Then you then get citizenship by blood.
But is that a provision that now prevails after the amendment, or was that always?
It's a provision that is in law currently, which means the Act 88 of 1995, which is what we are applying, is what actually applies now. Previously, it might have been another regime. You will remember that settlers before, when they came in to colonize other countries, they actually had preferred citizenship by soil, which means by land, because they actually will not have wanted children of people that they had sent to colonize other countries to then lay claim to citizenship of those parents, which means that they will remain there because they will have been born in those countries, which was sort of somehow of a disadvantage. But the principle right now that we are applying is that you get your citizenship by blood, which means one of your parents must have been a South African citizen. It does happen where people think that lines do get blurred. For instance, around our border communities in the Free State area, around Mpumalanga and in the northern parts of KwaZulu-Natal, where you will have a father coming from Mozambique, but a mother being South African, or a mother being South African and the father being Mozambican. In those particular instances, there are internal control systems that we will have built in to make sure that what is being claimed is true. For instance, we require records of birth, we require documents of the mother, and so on. Yeah. But in the case of a father, because remember, a father Taban can come and say, look, I've had 10 children this year, and all of them, they are with different mothers, and as such, we have to then administrate paternity tests to make sure that by blood, that particular child is entitled for citizenship.
So what happens in an instance where the parents, both of them, are of other countries, so of other nationalities. Let me put it that way. I'm not sure in this particular case whether they would have obtained naturalized citizenship, but at the time of birth, they registered the birth through our Birth and Death Registration Act, or at least attempted to do so while they come from other countries.
Well, a child that is born in South Africa is not a South African citizen, especially if both parents are from other nationalities. What we do as a Home Affairs, we take the responsibility because we can't have people who are stateless. When that particular child is born, we issue what we call a notice of birth, which means we notify the country of origin that there is a citizen of yours that has been born here. It is therefore the responsibility of those parents to take the notice of birth to the embassy and register the child with the country that the child is belonging to. And there is a lot of confusion there that we have seen because people think that just by me being born in a South African hospital, you therefore qualify for citizenship. That is not true. You do not qualify for citizenship. We do give you a document so that you are documented that says that you have been born in South Africa and your parents must do as such. In some instances, we have a lot of foreign nationals who are here in the country legally, by the way, and who are in various visa regimes, which we encourage for people to come and work and get in the country legally. The child follows the status of the parent. If the parent, for instance, is in the country on a long stay visa or a PR, permanent residence, that particular child will follow the status of those of their parents. It does not mean that they are then automatically inserted into the population register as a citizen of South Africa. Other people who are naturalized, there is a very clear process of naturalization. It is very transparent. It is set up according to the contributions you will have made in the country or that you are still going to make in the country. For instance, other countries, they scout doctors around the world and say, hey, look, a first doctor who did an ear transplant, and then they offer that person naturalization on the basis of the contribution that they are going to be made. But that is not a direct entry by birth into the national population register. You are just being invited to be naturalized because we recognize it can be in sports, it can be in academia, it can be in various areas where your skills are seen as very important for the country. And the reporting for that goes up until at a parliamentary level. So it's a very transparent process. It will not have happened, without anyone knowing or without any records. But the bottom line is that if you are a citizen by birth, you must have been born of South African parents.
How does the legal status of the parent's admission affect the child who could have lived not anywhere else, but in South Africa all their lives, and could have been born at a time where the 1995 or Act 88 of 1995 was not in place?
Well, we get a lot of, that is why also the Act provides for citizenship by descent, which means that you probably have two parents, stayed in South Africa, were born here before, and they had South African citizenship. They then moved to another country, say Italy, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, wherever that they move to. And then the child, when it grows up, then says, look, my parents were actually South African citizens, and I want to claim my citizenship on the basis of descent, that these parents of mine were actually South African. That is allowed. You can apply for that. It is within the law.
If the birth was not registered?
Well, we'll have to look at the records, because remember, even if the birth is not registered by us right now, whether you are born in a mission in Angola and your parents are South African, and then they will be issued with a notice of birth in Angola, and then that notice of birth will then eventually come through to us. So it really does not matter in a case where on our system that citizenship is by blood, because it doesn't matter where you are born. You must just be born out of South African parents. And so long as we have evidence that is conclusive that your parents are actually South African, then you deserve a right to be admitted into the population register as a citizen.
Yeah. So I read somewhere, if, of course, you're still under guardianship, your parents would you automatically take the status of your parents. But what happens now when you are an adult? And as an adult, you have not lived anywhere else but in South Africa, and you now want to take up citizenship?
Well, there are other processes. Like I'm going to say this, most of the people who are in guardianship, means that those people will have been adopted. And if you are adopted, there is then a court process that says, look, Njabulo Nzuza, you are now formally the parent of this particular child. And by being a parent of that child, it means I take responsibility for that child. So if I am a South African, then that child immediately can apply for citizenship because they qualify because I have adopted that particular child. It's not a decision that is taken by Home Affairs. It is a decision that is taken through courts and other legal instruments. Ours is just to administrate the registration since the court has already declared that I am responsible for that child. That particular child is mine by law.
So if you are of parents of other nationalities, you were born in South Africa, now you want to take up citizenship and you want to renounce, as it were, the citizenship of either one of your parents, what would be the process?
Like I'm saying, the access, which is what I think we all ought to take as the basic principle here. You can't be born of Mozambican parents, both of them Mozambican, and both of them do say that, yes, this is our child. We have come to South Africa. We are staying in South Africa. How we are staying in South Africa, we are staying through a PR process. When you are born, immediately when you are born, you do not even have to wait to be an adult. You must go and get your PR application so that you follow the status of your parents. We must not create confusion that people who are born outside of South African parents can, at their own decree, at any point and stage, then come and say, look, I want to be a South African. It will obviously have to be the issue of naturalization on the basis of what you would have contributed. But for children whose parents actually left the country, stayed in another country, and then the child says, look, my parents were South African, they can come back and apply and get citizenship.
You see, one of the confusions, of course, would have also been born out of that debate that would have happened a couple of years ago, of whether or not if you've stayed 15 years in a particular country, that gives you automatic naturalization into a country. So you have now somebody who says, I was born here, I'm now 21, right? And now I'm an adult. Because I've lived in the country for 21 years, and now I'm an adult, I choose to be a citizen of South Africa. Therefore, whether my parents are Mozambican, whether my parents are Zimbabwean, I renounce that citizenship. I'm taking up South African citizenship, and I'm a naturalized South African because I've been in the country for more than 21 years.
No, the number of years you have stayed in the country or in any country can never say how are you, when you become a citizen of that country. You can stay in the country 10 years. Because remember, some of the people who will stay in the country will come in illegally and stay in the country for 10 years, without being detected, without being noticed or anything. And then they come in after 10 years and say, look, I've been in this country for 10 years, therefore naturalize me. The process cannot work like that. And that is why the major principle in which countries base the issue of citizenship, it is either by land, whether you are born there, or either by blood, which means one of your parents must be there. Can't be just be the issue of you having stayed a certain number of years. Obviously, people enter into the country via various visa regimes, and then they seek PR, which is permanent residency. It's not citizenship, it's permanent residency. You only get at that level when you are then naturalized. Some come in, they say, we are fleeing from our own countries. We've been in South Africa for 15 years. I am a refugee. You maintain your refugee status. Then if you are going to be naturalized, there will be time and processes that you must undergo to do that. But you can't just wake up in the morning and say, look, now I've stayed 15 years in South Africa, I'm eligible to be a citizen, give me my smart ID card number that confirms that I'm a South African. Then obviously South Africa will somehow end up losing its nationality. So we must preserve the law, and we are applying the law in this regard. That is the Citizenship Act 88 of 1995.
So I think you're now putting something in perspective here. There's something called permanent residency, which is something separate to citizenship.
Exactly. There are various visa regimes in which a person can come into the country. Part of those are temporary residents. They come for work visas. You will know that right now we are looking at a visa reform to introduce under new sets of visas to attract visitors and so on and so on. So part of the visa regime, there's something that we call permanent residence, which means we are a resident of South Africa. It does not mean that you are a citizen of South Africa. A typical example will be a right to vote. You will not have that particular right to vote, but you are a resident, not a citizen. So those are two different things. Even in terms of how we identify people with the codes that are built into an ID number, they are able to tell you that this one is a citizen, this one is not a citizen. When we work with the IEC to prepare a voter's roll, we prepare a voter's roll of citizens, people who are eligible to vote and then to be voted for. Those ones are actual citizens. They are not residents. And that is why I keep on saying when a child is born here in South Africa and the parents are both foreign nationals, they are sitting in the country with their temporary residence, the child then follows the status of the parents, which means that the child, as and when they are born, we have to issue them with a permanent residence, which is the status already afforded to the parents.
So talk to me then about how that then speaks to the other departments, your counterparts, at education, higher education, at sport, at social development and so on and so forth. Permanent residency versus citizenship. For example, when it comes to education, are you then admitted into South African schools as a permanent resident? There are others who have argued that now I want to go in and study and I can't get an ID or something of that nature.
Look, there was a judgment that clearly told us that you can never chase away a child from school on the basis that they are on a visa or they do not have paperwork or they do not have citizenship. They actually qualify to come into the country. We've got a lot of children. If you look in the Maseru border post, we have actually even created a line there where children move from Maseru to South Africa to come and study here because of that particular judgment. So they are allowed to come in and study. Even worse, those of PR, even better, let me say, those of holders of permanent residences, they are able to go to any school and they are admitted, they can study through here, they can stay in here. The only issue is that they do not get citizenship. And then there are people who come in for sports, particularly to play for South African teams. They are given a certain visas, work visas, to allow them to work into the country and do all that they can through those particular visas. Others come here for tourism, which are short stay visas and so on. So there are various sets of visas, but those have nothing to do with citizenship. Citizenship is another issue altogether. It has to do with you belonging into that particular country.
Yeah. Okay, maybe let's put it a little bit closer.
Yes.
National, cultural, sporting activities where the individuals are representing South Africa. How does that play out as far as citizenship is concerned?
Yeah, you have, when you are representing a country, some of the people are naturalized. And let me go straight to some of the example of the stars that we know in rugby, some of them we know in soccer and so on. Those are people who cultural institutions will come and say, look, we want to make an application for naturalization of Njabulo Nzuza because we realize that Njabulo Nzuza has talent, he has a lot to contribute into the country, and there is a formal process for that person to be naturalized. And when they are naturalized, they then get that particular status of being a citizen through naturalization. And it's a very clear process, as I've said before. It takes you from application right up until where we have to report to Parliament that so-and-so has been naturalized now, and therefore they can play for the South African national team. They can enjoy all the rights that are enjoyed by citizens because we have naturalized this person. So those cultural institutions are the one that gives us advice that, look, here is an issue. For instance, there will be a person who makes a huge medical discovery on an operation of an eye, and then South Africa's Medical Association says, look, we need this doctor to come here and share experiences with South Africans. This is actually good for the country. It will help us. We then offer. That's why I also made an example of one doctor offered by Canada from here in the country to say, look, we can give you citizenship. We are going to naturalize you because we recognize that the talents that you have will contribute immensely in the country. So that is a very separate matter from a citizenship by birth, where a person says, look, me, I'm a South African because my mother and father are South African, or either or my mother is a South African. And also, I must say that we get a lot of cases where people come to us and they say, look, we believe that there's been something that has happened here. Please look into it. We do look into those issues. So we do not just mean that because a person has been given citizenship or has an ID card, then we then assume that all is well. If there's issues, we look into those issues.
Now, I know you've already declared very clearly you're not here to discuss statuses of people, private matters in this particular conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a broader conversation on citizenship. But I wonder if you are at liberty to tell us if your colleague in cabinet can come to you and inquire, because people have been pushing him to say, well, inquire if this particular individual is entitled to participate in a pageant that is South African in its identity.
Yeah, again, I will not go to that. What I will say is that most of the work we do, Tabo, is mainly intelligence driven, and sometimes we get a lot of informants coming into the department. They write us letter day in, day out. They say, look, there is a group of illegal foreign nationals that are gathered in Mpumalanga. Please have a look there. We go there and we have a look. So anyone who comes within the ambit of the law and requests us to do certain things that we are required by law to do, obviously we do. But you will remember that there's issues of PAJA that have to be, protection of public information or personal information, rather, POPIA that we'll have to adhere to. So there are all those processes. But generally, any member of the public, can come to us. And actually, we encourage that because we work closely with the public. Some of the incidences that we will see in the country where we make massive arrests around syndicates and all those things are driven through informers that come to us. So it's not just for any specific case that, no, we are taking this case specifically and so on. No, all cases that are brought before us for us to investigate, we actually do look into them.
DM, I'll push my luck once again, and I'll put it this way, right? Do you have relationships with private sector entities like pageants that might want to verify the status of particular contestants within their entity to be able to verify their citizenship, and they can tap into your database and be able to do that?
You know, Home Affairs runs one of it's a very amazing database that we run. In fact, the country will not operate the way it's able to operate if we were not running that database. I can tell you right now, if you click in your app and try and apply for a loan or a short-term loan, the bank will come straight to Home Affairs electronically, verify the ID number, verify everything that it needs to verify. So we run a verification database. I mean, you will see sometimes you even go to other institutions which are private that do have access to our database in a very safe and secure manner, your TransUnion institutions and so on. So all those institutions have access to actually check. But when we are talking about issues of then fraud that says, look, the person is in your system, it's fraudulent, and we have evidence, we also look into those things.
All right. DM, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on and your intervention this evening. Deputy Minister at Home Affairs in Njabulo, Nzuza there. Right.